These waves aren't anything like the native Atlantic rollers that Greenland boats were built for, but the easy way this hull lets waves slide by it shows that the low volume strategy works very well. This also gives us a chance to check out the silencer function of the high stern that Harvey mentioned earlier. It's too noisy to tell about that, but the action of the waves as they follow the curve upward rather than breaking across the deck is clearly visible. Some of this lift comes from the horn shape itself, but a lot has to do with the volume in front of it that gives it support. By conforming to the wave shape, the curved stern post effectively increases the waterline length of the kayak without incurring some of the problems that a long overhang might develop in the same situation. The horn shape has its own advantages, for rolling for instance, but it is also shaped the way it is because it's the logical consequence of tailoring the hull volume in front of it. And because the hull has so little excess buoyancy, the waves that pass by have only a slight effect on it. A more buoyant hull, especially one so light, would show a much stronger motion, rising and falling with each passing wave. As the kayak crosses the waves, this same neutrality allows them to pass under very little change in angle of heel. Most of the lean we see comes as much from the paddler's hip motion as it does from any wave action. This section of choppy water shows how longer boats can be at a disadvantage under some conditions. The long length of hull combined with buoyant ends creates a high drag when the wave period is too short. That's one reason kayaks in the Bering Sea are normally made a few feet shorter. In this rest position, with the paddler floating but partially submerged, the hull is in a stable state and it doesn't need paddle assistance to maintain it. Another advantage of the Greenland kayak's relative hull neutrality is that this means the paddler's influence of the hull is potentially quite great. Let's use the slow motion camera for one last look at Greenland wave riding. Because the low volume hull is largely immersed in what is effectively still water, and because of the well-shaped ends, each passing wave has very little effect on this kayak. Remember that the relative motion of water inside the wave is virtually nil. It's the energy pulse, not the water, that travels with a non-breaking wave. As far as this kayak is concerned, what the wave sees is an object of relatively neutral buoyancy, somewhat like a drift log that exhibits very little reactivity to the wave as it passes by. These waves give us one last chance to see the action of the curved horn-style stern. The waves do appear to follow the shear curve, much as Harvey described earlier in his living room. But what is interesting is that although this is a narrow and rather delicate portion of the hull, the buoyancy, that's the volume, is so well tuned that the shear appears to skim the wave surface, and only rarely does it allow the water up on the actual deck. This action is very similar to what we observed with the Aleutian bow earlier. What this suggests is that shape is not ultimately the key factor, because there are at least several stern or bow shapes that work successfully. What is common to all the successful ones that we have seen today, and what appears to be the unifying factor, is the degree of skill with which hull volume, especially in the ends, has been adjusted to meet the particular user and local conditions.